Helen Duncan was born in Callander, Scotland, on November 25, 1897. From an early age, she is said to have displayed the gift of medium with the spirit world. A prominent feature of her sittings was her ability to emit ectoplasm from her mouth during her trances, a stringy white substance that is supposed to give form to spirits and allow them to communicate. She made a living by conducting seances throughout Britain, during which the spirits of the dead were alleged to have appeared, talking to and even touching their relatives. Duncan was accepted as a minister to a sizable network of spiritualist churches and private homes, but her work was not without controversy. In 1931, she was denounced as a fraud by both the Morning Post newspaper and an organization called the London Psychic Laboratory, which had examined her. She was also prosecuted at Edinburgh Sheriff's Court in 1933 for affray and being a fraudulent medium, for which she was sentenced to a fine of £10 or a month's imprisonment. During World War II, Duncan lived in Portsmouth, the home of the Royal Navy. In 1941, the spirit of a sailor reportedly appeared at one of her seances, announcing that he had just gone down on a vessel called the Barham. HMS Barham was not officially declared lost until several months later, its sinking having been kept secret to mislead the enemy and protect morale. Unsurprisingly, Duncan's activities attracted the attention of the authorities, and on January 19, 1944, one of her seances was interrupted by a police raid during which she and 3 members of her audience were arrested. Duncan was remanded in custody by Portsmouth magistrates. She was originally charged under Section 4 of the Vagrancy Act, 1824, under which most charges relating to fortune-telling, astrology, and spiritualism were prosecuted by magistrates in the 20th century. This was considered a relatively petty charge and usually resulted in a fine if proved. She was eventually tried by a jury at the Old Bailey for contravening Section 4 of the Witchcraft Act of 1735, which carried a heavier potential penalty of a prison sentence. In particular, the medium and her 3 sitters were accused pretending to exorcise or use human conjuration that through the agency of Helen Duncan spirits of deceased persons should appear to be present. Duncan was also charged with offenses under the Larceny Act for taking money, by falsely pretending that she was in a position to bring about the appearances of the spirits of deceased persons. The trial caused a media sensation and was extensively covered in the newspapers, many of which reveled in printing cartoons of witches on broomsticks. At one stage, the defense announced that Duncan was prepared to demonstrate her abilities in the witness box. This amounted to conducting a seance in the court while in a state of trance, and the offer was refused. Duncan was found guilty as charged under the Witchcraft Act and sentenced to 9 months in Holloway Prison, London, but she was cleared of the other offenses. She was the last person in Britain to be jailed under the Act, which was repealed in 1951 and replaced with the Fraudulent Mediums Act following a campaign by spiritualist and Member of Parliament Thomas Brooks. There are 2 common misconceptions about Duncan's conviction. The first is that she was the last person in Britain to be convicted of being a witch. In fact, the Witchcraft Act was originally formulated to eradicate the belief in witches, and its introduction meant that from 1735 onward an individual could no longer be tried as a witch in England or Scotland. However, they could be fined or imprisoned for purporting to have the powers of a witch. The second misconception is that she was the last person to be convicted under the Witchcraft Act. Again, this is incorrect. Records show that the last person to be convicted under the Witchcraft Act was Jane Rebecca York in late 1944. Due to her age, she was in her 70s. She received a comparatively lenient sentence and was fined. Additionally, it has often been suggested that the reason for Duncan's imprisonment was the authorities' fear that details of the imminent D-Day landings might be revealed, and given the revelation about the Barham, it is clear to see why the medium might be considered a potential risk. Nonetheless, then Prime Minister Winston Churchill wrote to Home's secretary, branding the charge obsolete tomfoolery. Helen Duncan was released from prison on September 22, 1944, and seems to have avoided further trouble until November 1956, when the police raided a private seance in Nottingham on suspicion of fraudulent activity. No charges were brought, and shortly afterwards, on December 6 in the same year, the woman who is sometimes remembered as the last witch died. A campaign by her descendants to clear her name continues to this day.